When I started my entrepreneurial journey, there was one founder that I really admired out of the gate. He had these like legendary stories about sleeping in boats to sell his t-shirts. And at the time, he was just starting to run his business, My Great Lake, full time right after graduation. And for me, that was the dream, to be able to work on your business full time post grad. That was the dream. And today, Kylen Blom is now a good friend and someone I still really admire. He's now the founder of Silkscreen Marketing, an art focused production studio in Holland, Michigan, where he's built an incredible studio that takes your normal like swag items, particularly t-shirts, that usually are t-shirts that you like probably go to sleep in, but with his creative design team, he's actually made to make them like some of the best t-shirts and t-shirts that you want to pull out of laundry and immediately wear. They become your favorite t-shirts. So in this deep dive, we'll explore how a college pitch competition led to him sleeping in the boats around the Great Lakes, how his small team competes with the giants, and how Kylen and his team think about growth in a different way than I think most businesses do. Let's dive in. Kylen got started at the same college that I got started in Hope College, which is a small Christian college based in Holland, Michigan, with about 3,400 students. And at the time, Hope was just getting kind of started into entrepreneurship. They were like dabbling in it and whatnot. And Kylen was one of the very first students to really do something larger at Hope. And one of the ways they were kind of helping to seed entrepreneurship within Hope was through these pitch competitions. But instead of me explaining how these like pitch competitions were really valuable and kind of kickstarted a lot of different entrepreneurial journeys, here's Kylen to explain.
I was doing idea pitch competitions around campus right as they were getting started. And it was like the grand prize was a $200 cash card, which was groceries for a month. So I just came in and pitched all sorts of ideas and had a blast with it. And one of the judges came to me with this whole concept of t-shirts for each of the specific Great Lakes. And it's like, that's kind of cool. I was like, this is a perfect excuse to travel and also do a startup. And so that's kind of where it got going, is just why not? Let's try it for a summer. And if it doesn't work, the worst thing that happens is we had a great time cruising around, and asked a couple of friends if they wanted to join. And, they're just like, yeah, what's the catch? It's like, no catch. We're just going to drive around the Great Lakes and stay as close to the water as we can and end up where we end up and sleep where we sleep. And people just loved it. And everyone we talked to along the way loved the stories. I mean, we were cash poor. I mean, every dollar we had was invested in getting t-shirts printed, because we weren't printing them ourselves. We had to batch order them. And the more you order, the cheaper they are per shirt, the better our margin. And so we were just going around town to town trading t-shirts for a beer and a burger kind of thing. And people loved it. We'd pull into Leland and walk through Fishtown, and it's like, hey, the cheese shop, we've got a t-shirt if you can get us a sandwich and a beer. He's like, I can't ring that up, but I'll do it. I'll take it. I think we were in almost 30 retail locations by the end of those 2 summers, and it's like very successful. I did very little direct to customer sales. It was mostly just to other businesses, which made it a lot easier to justify than buying a press myself.
So it's kind of a crazy story. He was really just like, hey, that's grocery money for the month. And all of a sudden, though, he's like sleeping on boats and traveling the Great Lakes and trying to just get all these different t-shirts into all the different retailers around the Great Lakes. Now, if you're not from the Midwest, you might be thinking like, why does this idea have any appeal? Well, if you're from the Midwest, like typically, right, you have a lot of pride, specifically around your state or maybe your hometown, like just the locations. There's a lot of pride in being like, hey, I'm from Michigan, right? One of the jokes that gets thrown my way is, right, you always know like if someone's from Detroit, and that's because they've already told you. And yes, I am guilty of this, but you know what? Screw it. Go Tigers, and I hope the Yankees lose every game. Anyways, Kylen was able to then take this idea, create the shirts, right, and then go to all these different retailers across the Great Lakes. And as he mentioned, right, they got over 30 retailers, and that's a pretty decent scale. That allowed Kylen to then go buy the equipment to actually start producing the shirts himself rather than having to order them from a secondary vendor. And you would think, if you have the right equipment, like printing on t-shirts can't be that hard, could it? Well, Here's Kylen to explain some of the product issues they had out of the gate and how they overcame them.
I bought a press and a dryer and exposure unit, all of the basics on like a Friday, and brought it all to the barn behind my parents' house and just figured out how to screen print. And this was when there was like, this will date me certainly, but like YouTube had 5 how to screen print videos, and they were all for like massive machines coming out of the manufacturer, and there was no like, hey, this is how you do it, online tutorials, like nothing. And it was like, okay, so let's try, see what happens. And it took me all weekend, next to no sleep, got the order of shirts done, brought it up to Ludington. I came back with like half of the shirts because the shop owner was just like, I can't, no, this isn't straight, this isn't aligned correctly. And then even more of those shirts came back from customers after like I put it through the wash and all of the ink just disappeared. And so he's like, dude, you have a quality problem here. It's like, I have very many quality problems here. So ended up, figuring it out. It's got to go through the dryer at a certain temperature for the ink to stay, and the exposure unit has to be a very specific time, otherwise your lines get blurred, and you've got to keep your screens in a certain way, in a certain tightness for everything to line up. And so we, figured it out, and just had a lot of late nights and crazy times. I was using a closet-sized bathroom to expose all of my screens. I had to run a garden hose from the outside through the window to spray it off in the shower. There's just emulsion everywhere. It was great. We had a blast doing it. And then I ended up living upstairs of that barn area, so I had roommates and an employee at the time and an intern, and it would just be like 5 or 6 of us hanging out there, printing shirts, doing whatever. And it was great, and it was fun. It wasn't financially successful, but it was a blast. It was like, yeah, I like this a lot.
After figuring out all the different product issues and really kind of taking My Great Lake to a pretty decent spot, Kylen decided to actually sell it to a larger apparel company in Michigan. And so that way he can move on to like new ideas and ventures. And basically, right, the incentive to get grocery money turned into a business that was acquirable. That's a pretty decent outcome, I would say. But even after selling the business, right, Kylen kept one of the screen printers from the sale, so that way he could still be building shirts or making shirts at some point. And he did just that. Even after selling My Great Lake, he was working on like different various projects because people were asking him to kind of do kind of side projects. He might be making a few dozen shirts, designing a new logo, websites. He was kind of like this like digital handyman for a lot of different people. And that led to what is now Silkscreen Marketing, his current company. And through all the different various projects, right, he kind of like built a pretty interesting niche. And that is, he does some marketing and design work, and yet now he has a team alongside him. But he also has found a kind of a sweet spot of being able to print shirts for local businesses, the sweet spot being about 50 to 300 different custom shirts. And that really makes him pretty unique. But instead of me explaining, here's Kylen to explain kind of this niche and how they are able then to compete in a pretty competitive market in t-shirt making.
We're not the shop for high volume because we do everything by hand. There's the fully automatic presses out there that will just rip through thousands of shirts in a day, and we're not that shop. So if people come to us with a quote for 3,000 shirts, the first thing we tell them is, we'll give you a quote. We would love this business, but you'll probably get a cheaper product elsewhere. Our sweet spot and where we're price competitive is we can do setups fast, whereas the big shops, that's not their forte. So if we're in the like 50 to 100 shirt or 50 to 300 shirt range, that's like perfect. Another value prop that we have is that people can come in, and it's like they can get their hands on a sample. They can see the process. They can understand when we say how screen printing works. Like, you can either do color blocks, and we can do up to 6 different color blocks, or we can do CMYK, and here's the difference, and let them feel it, let them see it. And they also know that there's like an expert behind the order. When you do the big online ones, it's just a computerized system that spits out a file and assigns it to somebody doing their thing on a line. It's manufacturing, and this is more of like a craft. It's hand done, it's hand printed. We're looking at and holding and feeling every shirt, and if it's not perfect, we're replacing it. Being actually physically in town is a big advantage. I think the design ability that we have as a shop, specifically Blake, is like unmatched, right? You walk through downtown and you look at all these different shops, and half of them are selling designs that he's made. And you walk around Hope, right? And it's all the campus ministry shirts, and it's just like our fingerprints are everywhere. And people, once they get their hands on our shirts, are drawn to us because of that quality element. They're used to a Gildan Ultra Cotton, and we're putting a soft blend in their hands, and they're just like, oh my gosh, I love this shirt. I wear it. It's the first shirt I pull out of the laundry as soon as it's clean. It's like, that's what we want. We do get people coming back because they say, like, I need more of this shirt.
So it's pretty interesting to see that like they've built a really solid business. And also Kylen mentioned, right, that most of their business is now just repeat customers. They have some new clients that kind of come in here and there, but because of the trust and their reliability and their quality of work, like they just don't need to have this like huge amount of new customer acquisition. And today, Silkscreen Marketing does about $300,000 in annual revenue, and they do it pretty consistently. But one of the things that's really interesting about Silkscreen Marketing and Kylen here is actually their kind of strategy and vision about how they go about kind of growing, or actually maybe not even growing, Silkscreen Marketing. And instead of me kind of explaining their approach to all of that, here's Kylen to explain their vision and strategy.
I think a lot of that depends on the team that we have here at any given time. Like, we've got 3 full-time people plus myself, and we're every couple of months checking in and having that conversation of what's next, where do we want to go, what do we want to do, who do we want to be. So sometimes it's like, let's get a letterpress and be able to do like traditional letter printing, like business cards, wedding invites, art prints. Like, sweet, let's do that. What kind of things do we want to do on the production side that we maybe haven't been doing? So, and now it's hats, right? We can do patches, and we can do all sorts of different things with them. And we've got the letterpress. Next, it'll be embroidery, so we can do like sewn in actual elements. So right now it feels like there's a focus on expanding on the production side, which is cool, but I think there's also capacity to expand on the web and design side. There's seasons of change always. Last summer started a boat rental company in Saugatuck, and so a lot of my time was doing that. Been the last couple of years building a software to manage boat rentals with a fully remote team. So a lot of my time has been spent doing that. Not a lot of it, and a lot of my time is spent here at the shop, but not always working on shop specific things. We've got a whole formula of things we could offer. We've got the printmobile to go and screen print on site at different events. How much do we want to focus on that? How are we going to dedicate time and energy to do that? Because it's hard to do that when everybody is working full time, and then an event on the weekend is extra. It's hard to always be excited to do that. So do we find a intern that's willing to kind of take that on, but now somebody has to coach the intern, and it's like, versus how much do we want to enjoy summer? It's just an ever-changing, evolving mix of what do we have the energy for, what are we passionate about, what do we want to be doing. Do we want to offer some limited retail out of the front of the shop? Do we want to move to a new location and showcase more of what we can do and put our press in the front window of a storefront downtown, and people walk by and see us print shirts, and we're a workshop that's, cool and gritty and can do web and design. And it's, yeah, where we'll be in 5 years, I don't know. It really depends on the team and what makes the most sense and what's a risk we can take financially. Having bootstrapped everything up to this point is kind of like, it's gotten us this far. Let's keep it going. And it maybe doesn't mean hockey stick growth, but I don't know if everybody really wants to break that $500,000 barrier. And now we've a much bigger company with a lot more that has to get done, and now more people, and now more management and more admin. And that means somebody somewhere has to spend less time on doing the fun things.
I find this approach to strategy and vision really fascinating. And I actually think it's really cool, right? It's not just like growth for growth's sake, right? As Kylen mentioned, right? They could go do $500,000 in annual revenue, I think, if they wanted. But like, that really takes the fun out of it. That really kind of takes the why of why they're doing this. And really what they want to be able to do, right, is build like a steady like way of living, but also like get that like creative fulfillment. And by doing this where it's like, hey, we have a little bit of revenue, a little bit of resources to invest in these little things like a letterpress or like a machine to make hats or patches, right? Like they have the resources to do that, and that gives them like that creative fulfillment of like, ooh, this is a new product, this is a new thing. But also, right, that gives them an ability to grow the business potentially, right? Because maybe like all their different clients, like actually they want hats, they want patches, they want these different things. And I think that's a really healthy approach. So that's the high level story of Silkscreen Marketing and really Kylen's kind of entrepreneurial journey so far. What I want to do now is actually go through the growth strategies that Kylen has used to build Silkscreen Marketing to over $250K in annual revenue. And to me, there's two different growth strategies that Kylen has been mostly focused on. And the first one is relationships. And Kylen's relationships are pretty visible. If you go into downtown Holland, you're going to see pretty much a ton of different designs that his team and himself have designed and produced. If you go into a store like the local coffee shop, Lamangelo's, you're going to notice like Kylen's designed the t-shirts in there and all sorts of things, right? And you might not even know that this Kylen and his team, but it's a really indicative, right, of like how deep their relationships are in downtown and how they've really cultivated a really strong network. And Kylen has done this in a few different ways. First, right, was like with the My Great Lake t-shirts, right? He just kind of walked into stores and those kind of things, but I'll talk about that in a second. But also Kylen mentioned, right, he'd go to like the networking events, he'd go to like the young professionals groups. He would just network like crazy and build a lot of strong relationships within the downtown area. And West Michigan and specifically Holland, right, it's a good sized town, but it's like not the biggest town. So by really like building a really strong network and being like known for being like the t-shirt guy essentially, right, it really helps him to build a lot of strong relationships very quickly. And also like it just kind of, you get to build a really robust client base. And as kind of you've kind of seen throughout this entire deep dive, like Kylen's been at this for over a decade, and he doesn't take on he takes on new clients, but most of his business is actually repeat business from the clients he's had for a really long time. Kylen's a really good example. If you network really strongly, especially in your local area, and can really build clients that are just like are doing repeat business all the time, and you build a lot of trust with them and do high quality work, like you can kind of stop doing marketing at an extent, especially if you're happy with the revenue that you're doing and the lifestyle you're living. Like you can essentially kind of turn off the marketing and just go to work. And I think for a lot of founders, that's pretty darn attractive. Growth strategy number 2 is cold outreach. And cold outreach, like we mentioned, like at the very beginning of this deep dive, right? Like Kylen was going around to all the different retailers. He was going in person to go sell these My Great Lake t-shirts. And right, that worked out. He got over 30 retailers that all worked out. But that process, I think, taught Kylen a ton of different skills. One, right, it made him comfortable with selling. But second, it also helped him build a ton of relationships with these retailers. He got a lot of the local communities, even all across the Great Lakes. He built a ton of relationships with these people. And also right now, like all of that credibility, he like has really compounded, right? So if there's like a new shop in town, or maybe there's a new business in town, right? If Kylen is meeting them at a networking event, or maybe he just like is meeting them, he's getting introduction to them, it's super easy for him to have credibility like out of the gate. And it's not really cold outreach, right? Especially if you're gonna be like, yeah, see all these designs, like the credibility him and his team have, and be able to show up in person and do that, like That's not cold outreach. That's pretty warm outreach. So that's the story of Silkscreen Marketing and Kylen Blom. If you found this episode helpful, I would love it if you can give it a like or even comment below. And if you're looking for more content like this, check out the Bootstrap report in the description of this episode.